I was born on July 17th, 1932 in Marlborough, Mass. I grew up in Marlborough. I have 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and I was the second oldest. If we didn't have each other, I don't know what we would have done because we were always together. We used to just go outside and play. Play like ring-a-levo or hide and seek and hopscotch and stuff like that. I was very close to my mother, and my poor mother couldn't even go downtown shopping without taking me with her. My mother got scarlet fever.
Scarlet fever lasted about 4 to 6 weeks.
And in those days, you had to be quarantined.
She was very despondent over it because she couldn't see her. We lived right next door. All it was a driveway that divided the 2 of us. But none of them could come in the house because I was there. The house was quarantined.
And as sick as my mother was, she had to sit in the window so that I could look at her all day long.
She missed my mother so bad, and she was so close to her. My mother was going to Canada for 2 weeks. I remember that she took Madeleine because she knew that she'd miss her so much, so she took her with her for 2 weeks.
Where I was born was in Massachusetts in Hudson, August 11th, 1932. And that's where I spent the 17 years of my life. Couldn't wait to get out of there. There were 4 boys and 1 girl in the family, and I was in the middle. As the middle child, you have to fight for everything that you want to get. I get along pretty well with my sister Barbara, but my brother Bob, who was just above me, we fought like cats and dogs, and my mother said, "You're gonna kill each other." We spent a lot of time outside, close to where the river was, and I spent an awful lot of time on the river, fishing and swimming, and in the wintertime we do a lot of skating on the pond and then on the river there. In our house, it got so cold sometimes that the inside of the windows would be all frozen, and we'd have so many blankets on that we just couldn't roll over in bed. But that's the way it was for everybody at that particular time, because things weren't really too good. We didn't realize it, but actually we were pretty poor.
We were just so used to not having anything, and you had to conserve. You had to have food stamps, but it's not the kind of food stamps you have today. It was rationed.
Saturday night was the night we took the weekly bath. And we didn't have running hot water like we do nowadays. We were lucky to have running water, period.
Being the girl, I got to go first. Usually it was me, and then Bobby, and then John. But we all had to use the same bath water, and I was lucky.
Back then, there wasn't any television. When we were kids, what we used to do on Saturday nights, we would sit around the radio and listen to different programs like Gangbusters, The Green Hornet, The Shadow, and that's when the announcement that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor came over the radio, and we were all sitting around that.
They were dropping bombs on all those ships, and all the soldiers and sailors. I mean, they were dying, because there was no warning.
Pearl Harbor really hit home because now it really involved us. And being involved, back then, there was a lot of scrap drives. You had to save all your scrap metal.
At that time, you couldn't even buy a tube of toothpaste unless you brought your empty.
Because at that time, I believe they were being made out of tin. And then we had these collections that we would bring this scrap metal to school, and somebody would come by and pick it up.
I remember having air raid drills. Everybody had to either put out their lights, but you had to pull your shades down at night so no light would be going through. During the war, it was just something we were used to because that's part of my early memories.
As far as school went, I hated every minute of it. It was just too confining for me. I like to be in the outdoors.
I think that I liked learning. What I really wanted to do was go to school for the rest of my life. I loved school. When I was about 16, I had been going to school at a Catholic school. And then when I went to Hudson High, that's where I met John.
I first met her, I believe, was at the swimming hole on the Assabet River. She came to Hudson High in my sophomore year.
We just talked to each other and saw each other every day because it was a very small school.
We just kind of hit it off together.
They saw each other every day as much as they could. They'd say, oh, here he comes again, you know.
Basically, she was probably the only girl that paid any attention to me.
I liked being with him, and we liked doing the same things. And finally, he asked me out, and most of the time we went to the movies. Actually, he was working at the theater too, and he used to let me in by the side door.
My uncle was the manager of the theater. One time I was letting Madeleine in, and unbeknownst to me, there was a buzzer on the door that every time somebody opened it, the buzzer would ring.
He got caught, but it was his uncle, so he didn't get into too much trouble. We had been together for so long. We went together for 3.5 years. We just automatically figured we were getting married someday.
It's just kind of natural, I guess, for me to get an engagement ring. But the biggest problem that I had was talking to Madeleine's father, because he was a big man, I'll tell you. And I was a little afraid to approach him and ask if I could marry his daughter, because in those days you did ask.
I remember him giving me the engagement ring. It was at Thanksgiving one year. He said, I think we're going to get married, or something like that.
I don't really think I ever did get down on my knees and propose to Madeleine. I don't think I ever got down on my knees for anybody.
We got married on April 19th, 1952 at St. Louis Church in Nashua.
I was her maid of honor when they got married. I love Madeleine. She was like a sister to me. She wore the same wedding dress that I did. John had never seen it because he wasn't around when I got married. It looked beautiful on her.
We had a very nice wedding. Nowadays, you do a lot of things different, but we were on an austerity budget at that time. One problem we did have, we didn't own a car. So how were we going to get to the church and away from the church? And we got a junker of a car to go on our honeymoon.
We went to Canada on our honeymoon.
Which was a trip at that time because you didn't have all the highways and everything that you have nowadays. We were traveling on the old Route 3.
When we got there, there was a barrier and it said road closed. We had gone the whole distance of New Hampshire up to Canada.
We are running low on gas, and we don't really know where the other crossing is.
He had me tell him where to go according to the map. I had never read a map before. Anyway, We got lost on our honeymoon, and it was all my fault.
We spent more time in the garage on our honeymoon than we did anything else. We did finally get to the other crossing and stayed at her relatives. Her uncle had an orchestra that played at the Chateau Frontenac. So we got to go to the chateau and check it all over. Now when you look back at that, that is really not the thing you want to do on your honeymoon.
I advise anybody who goes on their honeymoon, do not go to a relative's house. We were married a little over a year when I had Luann, and he was still in the Navy. I think she was 3 weeks old when he was shipped out to Japan.
I spent my 4 years in the Navy and I never set foot aboard a ship, but I got more airtime in than probably most people in the Air Force. There were 10-hour flights that we flew from Japan, and we would fly up along the Korean coast and we'd get up to Russia. We knew when it was time to turn around because we would get lit up with the radar, and we'd let the ground pounders know where the radar units were.
It was difficult because you never knew from one day to the next if he was going to come back.
One time we were flying on the eastern part over in the China Sea area. Once we got onto our duty station, we were flying at 500 feet. But before we got there, one of our engines quit on us. In order to stay up in the air, we had to lighten the aircraft. So the pilot told us to throw out everything that we could. I took all the machine guns and I took all those and threw them all out. And then we were still losing altitude, so we had to lighten the craft some more. So we were getting down to the point where we couldn't use parachutes, so I threw them all out.
I remember his mother getting a phone call from the newspaper saying that they heard that he had been killed, and she didn't want to let me know about that until she found out for sure. But it wasn't him, it was somebody else that had been killed.
We limped our way back, and we didn't get back to base. We went into Okinawa, and we landed there safely. All in all, that was probably the scariest thing that happened to me while we were over there.
I remember having my pictures taken constantly when I was younger, and that was because my father, when he first started out, when he came out of the service, was a photographer.
He did take a lot of pictures of Luann. She was a little over a year when he came back. Of course, she didn't know him, but it didn't take long. She got to know him.
I did bring back some souvenirs from Japan when I was over there, and I brought back these satin pajamas and wooden shoes and stuff like that.
He would get me all dressed up in these little Korean outfits and sit me with backdrops in back and all these Christmas decorations, and I would have to pose for him.
Took some greeting cards, pictures of her, and they came out quite nice, I thought. But at the time, she didn't like that idea of just sitting there and somebody taking pictures of her. One day, I was out picking up film, and I ran into my brother-in-law, Dave, and I asked him what he was doing.
Dave was a mechanic, and he found out that this station on Main Street was for sale.
Well, if you're interested, I'll go in with you. And we went into business together. Dave and John's Texaco. It was a little one-bay station with a couple pumps out there. He was doing the mechanical work, and I was pretty good at numbers, so I was doing most of the bookkeeping. That went along for a while, and then Dave decided that he wasn't making enough money at the garage business, so he decided that he wanted to get out. So I says, well, I'll buy the business.
He knew a little bit about cars, but that was only trying to fix his own car. He went to school nights to any place where he could learn how to fix cars.
Then John came along, and now we had the perfect family. We had a girl and a boy.
One of my earliest childhood memories is that we put a man on the moon. It was probably for that whole week. I just sat in front of that TV.
He sat there and waited and waited. You know how they say it'll go off at a certain time? Well, it took longer than that, but he would sit there and wait and wait and wait.
From the time I got up till the time I went to bed, and I remember my mother would just make me a plate, and I just sat right in front of that TV, and I didn't want to miss any of it.
He loved watching those rockets. That's what he always called them, the rockets. He was very interested. I'm surprised he didn't become an astronaut.
I do remember going to Bisset Lake.
I loved Bisset Lake. We had so much fun there.
Caught a lot of fish, did a lot of water skiing.
We used to have frog leg fests.
When we first started going to this little, what we call a frog pond, which had some real big bullfrogs in there, we would use a little piece of red velvet with a hook, and you just dangle it down in front of them, and they would grab a hold of it.
Then my father would like chop the leg right off, and I'd be like, Dad, and he's going, don't worry, they'll grow their legs back. Those were fun days, going out and doing things like that with my dad. One time my mom decided to go to confession.
I had said, is that meat or is it fish?
This is after years of us eating frog legs on Fridays.
And at that time, as Catholics, we weren't supposed to eat meat on Fridays.
He told her that it was meat. She walked out of there and just wanted to, like, hurl.
What makes me the maddest, though, is that now you can eat meat on Fridays. So what difference did it make?
In the wintertime, my father would bring the truck with a plow out onto the ice and plow an area for us to skate on.
I always liked hockey because I played it when I was in high school.
John was a goalie. I can remember when he played hockey, he went out on the ice and all you could see was this little person in this great big uniform as he started to skate towards the goal.
Our son John played hockey for most of his time when he was in school. Staying involved in it appealed to me. So I started out coaching Pee Wee hockey.
I do remember a father and son game. It was probably between 12 and, 15.
Don't know exactly how it happened, but there was supposed to be no checking.
I guess I'm used to playing with younger people, shall we say. And I do remember checking my father into the boards.
And I ended up with a cracked rib on that one there. By working 365 days a year, not taking vacations, and putting your 60, 70 hours a week, we got to be quite successful. At one point in time, we were operating 4 Texacos.
The only thing I did was payroll and do the books. We had that station on Main Street, and then somebody was selling the one on West Hollis, but anyway, he got into that one.
and one up on Amherst Street, and also one in Exeter. Well, Main Street was turned over into a self-service convenience store, and West Hollis Street was where we were doing the all our mechanical work there.
And that was a lot of work. My husband really wanted to make things easier, so he bought me a computer.
So that she could cut down on a little bit of this work and it would all be done by this machine.
In those days, it wasn't like you buy a computer and it's programmed so you can do anything you want with it.
Your computer came with nothing, and there was nothing inside that computer at all. You had to program the thing yourself.
I had these books, and I didn't even know where to begin. I didn't know how to turn the machine on. I had worked on it for so long, and most of the time I worked on it when he wasn't home because I didn't want him to know how much trouble I had with it and everything. And one day I got so mad, I told him that if he expected me to work on that computer, I wanted a divorce. Well, he got so mad. He went upstairs. The computer was upstairs. He comes back down with the keyboard and said, "Don't ever touch this again." I said, "Don't worry, I won't."
It was just an awful, awful experience, I'll tell you. Boy, she is very forgiving, I'll tell you, because I'm not an easy person to live with. She's willing to do anything for everyone, and she's just a very thoughtful person. I really love her for that.
He's a very hard worker. He was right from the beginning. I think he was before I even met him. Even to this day, he can't just sit still. He has to be doing something.
I couldn't have done it all by myself, that's for sure. Even though people think that I can do it all by myself, I really can't. You gotta have some shoulders to fall back on. I was very fortunate in that things did turn out very well for us, and that's the way it was ever since then, since we were 16 years old, and here we are still together.